is number 9 for our chapter 3 and 4 review. What we are doing for this one is we are graphing it. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to factor the denominator. When I factor the denominator, that's going to give me my vertical asymptotes because that's going to be where my graph is undefined. So I've got my x plus 3 on the top, and on the bottom I'm going to do x squared minus 3x minus 4. So I'm going to factor that. So I have x plus 3 over x plus something or minus something times x plus something or minus something. So I'm looking at a sum of -3 and a product of -4. So if I do x minus 4 and x plus 1, my numbers being -4 and +1, -4 times +1 gives me -4, -4 plus +1 gives me -3. So I now have this in factored form. So when I solve the numerator, when I put x plus 3 equal to 0, that is going to give me my x-intercept when I factor my numerator, when I set that equal to 0. So my x-intercept is going to be -3. So at -3, my graph is going to cross the x-axis. Now, excuse me, in the denominator, I have x minus 4 and x plus 1. Neither one of those can be equal to 0. So I cannot have 0 in my denominator at all. So when x is equal to +4 and when x is equal to -1, that is when my denominator is undefined. So these are going to be my vertical asymptotes. Vertical asymptotes. Okay? The denominator also dictates my domain. So for my domain, my x values cannot be 4 and they cannot be -1. So I am going to create my domain now. So I have -infinity all the way up to -1. Then I have -1 to 4. So don't forget that middle one. Lots of students sometimes forget that -1 to +4 for their domain. And my last one is 4 to infinity. And notice how on those I am not using brackets. They are all parentheses, and that means that my domain cannot be -1, it can't be +4. That's why I'm using brackets. So I have my asymptotes, my vertical asymptotes are x equals 4 and x equals -1. I have my domain. I do not have my y-intercept yet, so I do have my x-intercept, so let's go ahead and figure out my y-intercept. In order to determine my y-intercept, I put 0 in for all my x's. So I'm going to have 0 plus 3 over 0 squared minus 3 times 0 minus 4. So my y-intercept is going to be -3/4. And so that's going to be about right here. So that's my y-intercept. So for this one, I have at -1, I have an asymptote. I also have an asymptote at x equals 4. I have an x-intercept. We'll make that a little bit darker right there at x equals -3. And my y-intercept is at -3/4. And then the other part that I need right here is my domain. So I have listed all of the different things that I need. Now the final thing that I need is to be able to graph the function. And so we are going to slide to the next slide and look at what that graph looks like. Okay, here is the graph that I sketched, and I want to point out a couple of things. We'd already determined our domain on the slide before. Here is my x-intercept. That is always important. We only had one x-intercept, and that x-intercept was determined by setting the numerator equal to 0. Here's my y-intercept, and the y-intercept was determined by plugging in 0 for all of my x's. And these are my vertical asymptotes, my dotted purple line. So this is what the sketch of your graph will look like. I also did it on Desmos. You will be able to do it on your graphing calculator. And this is what it looks like on Desmos. And all of those things are the same. What I want you to be aware of is I want you to look over here. Do you see how I put the numerator and the denominator in parentheses? That is super important when you are plugging information into your graphing calculator so that you are able to keep your numerator separate from your denominator, and you are telling your calculator exactly what to do. So do be sure that you are putting parentheses around those. And that is it for our number 9.